As you can see by the title card, we are going to be discussing 10DLC today, registrations, and what's coming up and what is new within the process and the campaign registry itself. This is going to be a very interesting topic, so we'll go ahead and dive in with what our agenda is. So first things first, we are going to meet the speakers and do a quick introduction of who's here on this webinar. We're going to dive into the TCR process itself, what TCR is, what TCR isn't, and these updates that are coming through, as well as registration tools. What's new on that front, both within the campaign registry and within prompt.io. And then we're going to open it up to a Q&A session. Throughout this process, throughout this webinar, please do feel free to type up any questions you might have for myself or for Stefan, who I'm about to introduce here in a moment. And we'll go ahead and answer those towards the very end of this presentation. So on to meeting the speakers. First things first, I'm Faris Sokensanj. I'm president here at prompt.io. I've been in the political tech industry for about 14 years now, and in the texting space specifically for over 4.5 years. And Prompt, as many of y'all are aware, is a texting platform being deployed by political entities, advocacy organizations, nonprofits, polling firms, and the like. And so that's a little bit about my background and how I ended up where I'm at. I'm joined here by Stefan Heller, who is VP of Business Development and Global Strategic Partnerships at the Campaign Registry. I run into Stefan at every conference that we attend, and I'm always blown away by his depth of knowledge and experience in the telco industry, and really what he's brought to the campaign registry. He's been a tremendous partner. The TCR itself has been a tremendous partner to Prompt and our customers, and so we're in for a wealth of information here going through this webinar with him. So thank you, Stefan, for being here. I'll do a quick 10,000-foot view overview of the campaign registry. So TCR essentially serves as kind of the central hub for providers like prompt.io to be able to run through the registration process for our customers. Prompt has been doing TCR registrations for about 2 years at this point, a little over 2 years. We were one of the first ones to dive headfirst into the registration process as defined by the campaign registry. And as I mentioned, with Stefan being kind of at the helm of things over at TCR, we've kind of helped usher things towards the direction that would be the most beneficial and helpful to consumers and customers in the political space specifically. And so that's a little bit about the top level overview of the campaign registry. But I know that folks are mostly here to hear Stefan talk, not me. So we will go ahead and go on to the campaign registry and introduce Stefan Heller here and talk a little bit about the campaign registry itself. Really, the two things that we're going to highlight here before we get into the meat and potatoes of this conversation as it relates to these new tools that are being released is what TCR does and what TCR does not do, which we get a lot of, Stefan. We get a lot of questions around this, and so I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Faz. And as always, great to be able to see you again as well, although not in as close proximity as we normally are. However, so thank you for the intro. So what TCR does, we recently kind of had a bit of an internal discussion at TCR because we realized that we're trying to talk about it succinctly. We can talk about it for hours about what we do, but we try to pull it into a 10-second sort of sentence. And we came up with this, and I'm going to read it because it's recently been posted to our new revamped website. For anyone that hasn't been to our website recently, it has been revamped. We've got a lot of information in there now. As a CSP, there's a lot of information now in our knowledge base that's been vastly updated as well. So what we now say is that TCR, we serve as the backbone support for the 10DLC messaging ecosystem, facilitating and empowering efficient communication. So because at the end of the day, we are gathering information, we're validating and verifying that information, both the brand information, we want them to know that that brand, that pack, that that person who is running for election does exist. They actually are, it's a real entity, a real person. And then with the campaigns, we're gathering all of the respective information about what the campaign is that is being run, so that the people in the chain, people like Prompt and the awesome team over there, are going to be looking at that messaging campaign that somebody wants to run and checking off that, okay, this is going to meet the criteria that DCAs, carriers, people in the actual messaging flow are going to be saying, yep, great, make it go live. This is fantastic. And people often, wonder what else we do. And the fact is, we facilitate all of this information. We ensure that people up and down the stack, the messaging chain, they get this information so that they can make decisions on the validity of this. With that validity means that they can then pass it up to the next person in the chain, eventually, obviously, terminating into the carrier's networks.
That's great. That's great. And that's kind of been a little bit of our framing when we talk to customers as well, has been TCR in and of itself has been a huge net positive, I think, for the industry, because there are some hurdles, there are some pain points that have surfaced as well. And a lot of times when those surface at our level, one thing that we mentioned, if we can go back one, Ellie, one thing that we mentioned is that TCR is not the carriers. TCR is not the ultimate arbitrator of all these rules and things that are coming down the pipe. Maybe you can speak to that as well, so that we have the right kind of talk track for folks.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things that we get very sensitive about. What people say, we are not a gatekeeper. So this is really about just explaining what, who you are and what you do. We always say that in TCR, we gather the who and the what. Who are you? What do you want to do? Just tell people that. And tell people that. We validate and verify the who. We pass the information on the what to the respective parties so they can do their validation and verifications. We're not sitting there saying somebody can and cannot do anything. We're just gathering all the information and passing it up the chain so that we're ensuring that people are well informed to be able to make a decision.
So that actually, you kind of dovetailed into the next slide and the next thing I want to kind of touch on. So as relates to 10DLC registration in the political space specifically, kind of what I mentioned before, with any sort of situation like this where a new process is introduced, there's going to be pain points. I know that you and I have discussed a lot of timeline related pain points around registrations being approved, specifically because there's a different time clock when it comes to campaigns versus a more traditional e-com marketing use case. And I know that you guys service up and down all those verticals. And so, and again, you've attended all these conferences that I attend in the political space. So I'm wondering, what has been kind of the learning around how TCR has evolved as it relates to political space versus other verticals that you serve?
Sure. So one of the key things is that during any election cycle, we realize there's going to be crunch points. And so we have dedicated resources that whenever one of our political CSPs send in a support ticket to TCR, it's immediately elevated to priority ticket. So you don't even have to ask for it to be a priority. It's immediately a priority. Because the one thing that I've realized is that through no fault of any customer or any political operates in a very unique way. Somebody is doing fundraising, they're fundraising, their head is down in fundraising world. And then they finish fundraising and they literally will put on another hat and go, I need to run my campaign now, like right now, like this hour. I need it up and running right now. And part of the great things, like with people like Prompt, is that you've done an awesome job in educating your customers, in being able to say, okay, this is the kind of timeframes we need. We need to have these timelines. We need to be able to at least, we recognize that, when it's 3 days before the actual election or any election, and you've got monies left in your fund, you're probably going to want to spend it. And that's when you call us and go, we need to do a GOTV, or we need to do or whatever it is. If anything, please don't do a GOTV. It's because everybody else is doing it. And that's where you could lead to like almost voter exhaustion if you've got 8 GOTV campaigns slamming out at the same time from different entities. And this isn't anything specific to any one company can help. It's just the ecosystem. Everyone is looking at what's the fastest, easiest thing to do. Not only there's PACs that specifically operate in voter information. So my general things have realized that we need to operate quickly. We need to react fast. We need to ensure that we're unraveling problems as quickly as we can. Is it a TCR issue? Is there something stuck in TCR? If not, and a lot of the times it's the not, it is then where should we direct this communication to get the fastest answer? If we can help, we do, because, yes, we know the various people in the chain. And if there's something that is genuinely stuck and nobody understands why, then potentially we can make a call. And we have in many cases, we try to help out to try and unravel where the issue is. But sometimes it's nothing we can do. It's that call to action needs more understanding. Those T's and C's don't quite meet the criteria. They need to be rewritten. And that all just takes time. The problem with anything taking time is that everyone has less of it, especially in the political space. That's the one thing I would say, is that time is a very precious commodity and nobody has enough of it in political. When it comes to setting up the campaign, having it launch, and then also if something goes wrong, the time to correct it, it's all yesterday. Can we please do it yesterday? And it's tough because usually, you might have a customer of ours that sort of calls you up and goes, hey, we've got this issue. Can you please correct it? You look at what you can do and you realize that maybe it's a 24-hour period to correct it. And then it may slip to 48 hours. And it's because there might be 15 other things that same company you're talking to correct it are having to also correct other things. And everything starts to become a priority, which means that nothing's a priority because just everyone's screaming.
So that actually, you're dovetailing from one thing into the next. So the next thing I wanted to bring up had to do with challenges, because as you know from the conversation that you and I have had, a lot of times our biggest challenges have been what you just mentioned, which is timing. No. I'm wondering what your perception of the biggest challenges have been.
So in some cases, and I would say that kudos to you and your support team. We don't get a lot of queries coming in from customers of Prompt. So big up to your team and everyone over there at Prompt. You're doing a great job in informing your customers and helping them through the process of registering 10DLC. So, but there are other organizations where there are definitely, it is this misunderstanding of why things are a certain way. When you're terminating a message into the ecosystem generally, it may look like the rules and the regulations around it are huge. The hurdle is massive. But it's like, I suppose it's like most things. If you're looking at going into something and it says, okay, you've got to do these 22 things. These 22 things, you've got to help deliver these 22 pieces of information to ensure that we know who you are, that we validate everything, that you're verified, that you do this, you do this. You've jumped through all of the hoops. But once those hoops are jumped through, the next time you do another campaign, it's the same thing. So it's like a muscle you start to exercise regularly. It's like, okay, I know what to do now. I need this, 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 and this. So you can start to preempt. I know Prompt's been very good at this, that you inform your customers up front, we need these pieces of information from you to make your registration go smoothly. And if a customer doesn't give those clear pieces of information, it's kind of they're going to have a bad experience. It's almost like they're preempting a bad experience by not delivering what it is you need, because you know that if you have those pieces of information, everything goes smoothly. So the challenge we have is trying to continuously say to people, this information is going to help you. If you can get these pieces of information, this will help you. If you can do this, this will help you. I mean, for example, with Campaign Verify, and I don't normally talk about other organizations, but it's a challenge that we face because of a challenge they face. When you get a Campaign Verify token, in many cases, what will happen is that they will send it to the address that has been filed with the election, with that filed election, right? And what happens is that sometimes it goes to an address or an email that isn't often reviewed or used. So again, companies like Prompt, what you do is, you say to your customer, this email, you are going to have somebody standing by waiting for the validation code from Campaign Verify going to this email, aren't you? Or you're going to have somebody waiting by this address for the postal the postal communication with the code, aren't you? Because we have had many situations where somebody's screaming that they haven't got the validated code and therefore got their Campaign Verify token, because nobody's gone to the office to pick it up, or nobody's gone to the email to check. So it's, if you're, it's an indicative issue within elections. Sometimes a new campaign office is set up, right? And they've got a lot of either volunteers, or they've got interns, or whatever it is. And if you're lucky, you've got an experienced campaign officer who kind of knows what's what. If you're unlucky, you have somebody who maybe is looking at something and going, oh yeah, of course, this is the email address I was told to put in when I registered the election. But maybe didn't ask the question, does anybody look at that email address? Does actually anybody check it? Because if so, who? Or can I? Or because that's where the information is going to. These sort of things which slow things down are and it's such a simple thing. Yeah. Just that's what I find is probably the thing that the challenges we've had. It's the little tiny things that people haven't double checked and ensured that where communication is meant to be going back to, somebody's actually reading it. Somebody can access it. And that's what we I found is the biggest challenge, especially in the political space.
I would agree with that. And we have made it a point at the top of the sales process to articulate, hey, these are the things we're eventually going to need from you. Just throwing it out there so you're thinking about it. And we actually have someone that we have in-house whose job it is, I see you, Jared, to go and check on these specifically, which is a really, really good point, just to get ahead of it a little bit, and it'll smooth the entire process down, smooth up. So on that point, let's get into the meat and potatoes of why we wanted to connect today. So there's a new tool that is being released, has been released on the precipice. And we are very, very excited about this tool. We've heard about this from many, many other providers, folks who want to potentially use a provider like Prompt, or even if they want to use a provider other than Prompt, where they want to be able to migrate things like their token, their TCR registration, and have been limited in doing so, and as a result have not gone with the providers that they actually want to be using because of this limitation. And y'all heard us loud and clear and delivered or are about to deliver. So can you speak to this a little bit?
Sure. Delivered, I would say. This is actually live and active right now. So the one thing, again, that has been really important to me is that TCR should just get out of the way of any commercial decisions for somebody to choose a different partner to work with. So what we realized is that it was when somebody has a number of campaigns, it is hard for somebody just to sort of say, I'm going to re-register all of these campaigns with my new provider. It's a lot of work because we know what they've gone through to initially establish all of these campaigns. So what we've put in is this, there's two migration tools, but the one we're talking about is the most recent one, which is the campaign CNP migration tool. And in case, there's a lot of wonderful acronyms that everybody uses. They're usually all 3 letters. I don't know why that is the case, but many 3-letter acronyms. CNP is the connectivity partner, as opposed to a CSP, which is a campaign service provider. People can have dual functionality. So, Prompt is a CSP, but it's also a CNP. You can be a connection partner as well as be a campaign service provider. So in other words, another CSP can connect to Prompt and thereby use Prompt's tools and support team and everything else to ensure their messaging is easily and efficiently registered. Now, which in many cases, some people would maybe call this a reseller or an ISV. There's various different names, but if we just say that there's another company, another platform that is servicing and working with a number of different brands, then that company can say they were working with a different partner today, a different CNP. And they say, you know what, we want to move everything to Prompt. So that CSP who is currently with a different CNP can look at this migration tool and say, we don't have to re-register everything. We can actually enable the CNP migration, which currently the enablement of that CNP migration is only done over APIs. But thereafter, everything is available in the UI. And in that in that process of creating this CNP migration, what happens is that, again, what was critical to ensure is that the current path, the current CSP path was not interrupted. So traffic was still being sent until the new path was established. So what happens is that, and I'm going to use probably all the wrong technical terms, but it's probably easier. It was easier for me to understand and hopefully easier for everybody else to understand. We create a series of ghost campaigns of the ones that are wanted to be moved. Those ghost campaigns are set up with Prompt, and they are basically inactive, but they're a mirror image of what is running in market right now. And as they're being set up, Prompt can look at them and review them and approve them. And then it goes up the chain. And once it's approved by the final entity in the chain, then the campaigns are flipped from ghost to active, and the other existing campaigns are deactivated. So this enables existing traffic to keep on running, new traffic to be set up and then switched over. And this is a free tool and a free service.
That was going to be my next question. So we're doing great here. We're doing great. That's really, really exciting. So right now you said that this is API accessible. Timeline, do we have any sort of timeline for when it's going to be within the user interface of the TCR dashboard?
So just about everything is in the user interface now, apart from the actual initiation of the migration. That has to be done over APIs right now. And I know that companies like Prompt are very API savvy, and you guys are already very much connected into us over APIs. So this would be something that we have documentation, a lot of documentation already all around this. And I'm sure that your tech team have been devouring it and looking at exactly how you're going to build that into a great interface for your potential new customers.
You are making my job so easy on this call. Let's go to the next slide and we'll show why. So Prompt has also released a new product offering as an aside to the texting platform we refer to as Pulse. The idea behind it is this is the pulse of all your campaigns that you're running through Prompt, and it gives you a 10,000-foot overview of what is happening with every instance of Prompt that you are running for individual clients of yours, or individual campaigns you might be using. And it is also, as Stefan mentioned, directly tied into the TCR. So you get one page view overview of all registrations, what the status is, what's pending, what's not pending, what changes need to be are being recommended, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, this will also be the place where you would come to initiate migrations from one provider to Prompt. So that is also, so right now Pulse is live, it's active. If you're an existing customer of Prompt, you can request access to it. All net new customers are getting access to this as well. But as far as the evolution of this, the next evolution is, as Stefan mentioned, going to be the ability to kind of do this migration via API through our system as well. So there you have it. We are on to kind of the ending here around the Q&A portion of this. There's some questions, Stefan, that have kind of come in. So some of them I can go ahead and answer. So one question was, do you work with political texting? Obviously, the answer to that is yes. It's the bulk of what we're talking about here has been political texting. The other question is TCR partisan, which it is not partisan. If you look through the TCR partners page, you can tell that it is a who's who of different providers, including other outside of political use cases. So
yes, and we work on across both sides of the aisle.
Absolutely.
We have to. That there is no affiliation with one or the other. We just want to ensure that people can register as quickly as possible and get their messaging up and running for whichever party they represent.
Perfect. One question I had, this is a personal question, trying to get an answer to this. One, curious if you have any info on, has to do with T-Mobile and the daily caps that they tend to set that are lower than others. And I'm wondering, have you seen any success with appeals on increasing daily caps through T-Mobile or no?
Yes, I've seen the daily caps increased. There is a process. There is a business review process, I understand, that can be via a DCA that can be facilitated and presented to T-Mobile for their review. Obviously, that's not something that TCR sees, but I have seen caps increased. But obviously, like any company in this space, you want to make sure that you're increasing the caps for legitimate reasons and not just blindly sort of increasing it and then finding that you might have bad messaging go down those increased areas. And obviously for political messaging, T-Mobile does have a very, very high cap. Well, it's actually unlimited throughput for the people that come in with a campaign verified token for political messaging.
Got it. We kind of touched on this next question a little bit already, but if there's anything you want to color in around this, one question had to do with where the requirements, the TCR requirements originate from. Is there anything you want to add to what we discussed earlier around carriers and everything else?
So, yeah, I mean, TCR has been, when you look at the elements that are within TCR, what people are being asked to add in, all of these are based on really the CTIA messaging practices that they have out there, and also as a supplement, there are obviously carrier code of conduct. Now, the information and data that we're being asked to provide doesn't just come from carriers. This comes from DCS as well, the direct connect aggregators, the companies that have the direct contracts with the carriers. And they, at the end of the day, are the last they are a gate. They are the last gate before the messaging fully terminates into a carrier's network. And so they are going to be checking with a fine-tooth comb all of the, whether the campaign information put into TCR meets the minimums that are required for compliant messaging. The brand validation and verification, nobody wants impersonation. Nobody wants somebody who is not who they say they are sending messaging, whether that's a PAC, a politician, just any business. So when we do the validation and verification, those are the things that we're checking, and the adoption of the campaign verify token or the aegis token for political gives another series of checks to be able to ensure that there's validity of that entity. And with those, as been shown from AT&T and T-Mobile, if you have gone and been checked by these third-party independent organizations, then they will stand up more throughput for you. So it's very much a case of jumping through certain hoops does really get the rewards, because both AT&T and T-Mobile give a high throughput to political campaigns that have gone and jumped through those hoops and got the correct validations and verifications.
I suspect that we have probably addressed this throughout the webinar so far. One question has to do with common misconceptions about TCR, and we've touched on a few of those already, probably the most common ones, but is there anything that you'd also want to highlight?
So we're not in the messaging flow. That is, traffic doesn't come to us and we pass it on or anything like that. So we're not in the messaging flow. It is the responsibility of other partners to check for compliance. We are not a compliance house. We're not there to advise somebody what is or is not in compliance. While we collectively as an organization have a lot of experience in that, it is not our job and it's not our role. That is outside of our lane. That is the role of your campaign service provider, the person you're talking to, the people at Prompt, to advise you on whether something is or is not deemed a legitimately formed messaging campaign. So other things, TCR does not assign telephone numbers. We had that one a while ago. They thought that we assigned the numbers to a campaign, and that is not something that the campaign registry does. We have numbers in our system because we can see what numbers are assigned to a campaign ID. Because when the numbers are assigned, the campaign ID associated with those numbers, so that when we're looking at the campaign IDs, or when a DCA or a CSP or a carrier is looking at the campaign IDs for that campaign, they can see the number or numbers that are associated with that campaign. So we have a lot of numbers in our system, but it comes from a third-party system.
Let me ask one more question on that note, or as something I've been hearing from others around registered versus unregistered and the status of unregistered going into November of this year. And I obviously have heard a ton around this. I'm curious, is there anything that you can provide insight into there?
So when one hears about something and it has a date attributed to it, you have to look at the source of that information to understand if it is an ecosystem or an individual company. If it's an individual company, then only those associated or working with that individual company will have that date applied. Others may have an earlier date. Others may not yet have a date. So I would say that there are many dates that I've seen to do with unregistered and registered, or when unregistered may or may not be accepted. And this is not coming from the carriers, but from other organizations in the space who are responsible for the carrying and terminating of messaging traffic. And they all have independently decided on various dates to when they would accept or would not accept, rather, net new unregistered traffic. That is a long answer to your question, Faz.
No, it's interesting. I appreciate that answer because there's a lot of, to your point, there's a lot of dates. There's a lot of dates that are being thrown around, and it's a little bit of a, it can seem like a little bit of a shell game. But yeah, fair point.
It is very clear to me that there are a lot of companies who are making the decision that unregistered traffic has a whole series and a whole host of problems with it. The biggest problem is that unregistered traffic, you don't know who it is, you don't know what they're doing, you just don't know. And it can potentially be the source of bad traffic, or it could just potentially be the source of somebody that just doesn't want to register because they don't agree with the registration process. And either way, this is all about, a registration process is all about transparency. Tell us who you are, what it is you want to do. Are there costs incurred with that? Sure there are, because there's a lot of validation and verification checks that go through and have to be supported. But the costs are kept as low as feasibly possible, at least within 10 DLC, to ensure that the barrier to entry is as low as possible. And of course, that's not going to meet everyone's requirements. I know it's not. But you kind of try and do the best you can and deliver the most effective tools to help everyone in the ecosystem to try and ensure what you're doing is proving a barrier to entry to people that may want to do harm in the ecosystem. But if people that do harm in the ecosystem do get through, and of course they do, that it's recognized and highlighted as early as possible and dealt with in the best way possible, either shut down or whatever needs to be done once found. I think anyone that believes they've got the most perfect mousetrap is a little delusional. All you can do is ensure that when the trap goes off, you go and you see what it is and deal with it as fast as possible. The resolution time to something that should not have happened is equally as important as trying to stop as much of the bad things happening to begin with.
Ali, we can go to the final slide so folks can, if you want, write down our information. My email address is here, Stefan's is here. If there's any other questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A as we go ahead and wrap things up. Stefan, I've always enjoyed these conversations, and certainly I'm glad we were able to do this in a more public setting like this. Is there anything that you want to close out with?
The only thing I'll close out with, and I might be shouting into the wind, as we get closer to election day, as we get closer to November, let's just put it that way. Please, wherever possible, give your CSP, give Prompt as much time as possible to launch a campaign. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be manic. I know that everyone is going to be wanting to do the best for their individual PAC or, congressperson, whatever it is. But the more time you can give us, the more likely you're going to have a successful campaign launch. And I know that's not always going to be the case. I know that. but if you can, no, a matter of another day can make the difference between you having an effective campaign launched and somebody and or everybody yelling at everybody. So let's just try and help each other.
I can speak on behalf of the customer success team here at Prompt that we would also very much appreciate a heads up on on getting things up and running. But thank you so much for all this information, Stefan, and for joining us. And thanks for everybody, all our attendees for joining. This has been recorded. We will follow up with folks individually with the recording and with any questions that have gone unanswered. So thank you.
Thank you.